preservation of and increased access to the 92nd Street Y Humanities Audio Archives is generously funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities.
Good evening. My name is Robert Gilson. I direct the School of the Arts here at the 92nd Street Y. And for those of you who are not familiar with our programs, we offer over 250 courses and workshops each semester in visual arts, music, and dance for adults, teens, and children. And one course that we're offering this semester, which may be of interest, is called On the Eve of the Millennium, Contemporary Art at MoMA, which is taught by Dan Hyuni, who is on the staff of MoMA's Education Department. And our semester begins the week of February the 3rd, so I hope we'll see some of you there with us. Have you ever asked yourself what it means to be an American? How do we define our country and ourselves? What do we believe? What are our values? What's the truth about our history? At the 92nd Street Y, we've been asking these questions to ourselves and among the staff for the last several months, and we've reached one definitive conclusion that there's a different answer for everyone who lives here and has an opinion. But to help us examine some of these questions and some of the possible answers, we've created a new project called Project America. It will be a unique multi-year series of concerts, lectures, and exhibitions which will explore our nation's culture, history, ideas, and people. Project America opens next Saturday night, January 25th, with an incredible concert which will explore the question, what is American music? It'll be hosted by Bobby Short, who's an incredible cabaret singer, and Skylar Chapin, who is New York City's Commissioner of Cultural Affairs. The program features the musical talents of Dick Hyman, Odetta, Paula Robeson, Ron Carter, and the Yale Whiffenpoofs, among many other incredible talents. And I hope you'll join us for that. For information about the School of the Arts, Project America, and all of the Y's extraordinary programs, there are copies of our catalog in the lobby as you're heading out, and I urge you to pick one up. This evening's program with Richard Tuttle marks the first event in this year's Artist Vision series. The next lecture is with Alex Katz on February 13th, followed by Adrian Piper on March 6th, and Elizabeth Murray on May 15th. The moderator for Artist Visions is Robert Storr. Mr. Storr is a curator in the Department of Painting and Sculpture at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. He is currently working on a series of exhibitions examining European avant-garde painting after the war, entitled Beyond Boundaries, and he has also curated the late de Kooning show, which opens at MoMA next week. The format for this evening will be as follows. Mr. Storr will come out and do a brief introduction of Mr. Tuttle, and then Mr. Tuttle will come on stage and show slides for about 20 minutes to half an hour. After the slides presentation, Mr. Storr and Mr. Tuttle will talk about Mr. Tuttle's work and ideas, and toward the end of that discussion there'll be an opportunity to pose questions from the audience, and we encourage you to do so, should you so choose. Thank you for joining us, and please help me to welcome Robert Storr.
Hello. Tonight will be, as Bob has said, the first of a series of 4. As you can tell from the list, it's quite an eclectic gang. And that is an expression of my view that contemporary art is made in many different ways and in many different circumstances, and that to truly grasp it is not a matter of seizing one idea and following it to the end, but actually looking at the diversity of what's being made and the ways in which the contradictions which arise and also the unforeseen overlaps among seemingly dissimilar people tell you an awful lot more about art in general and the work in question that you may be looking at than trying to pursue a single idea. I should say that, for starters, it's appropriate that we should have Richard Tuttle begin this series inasmuch as he has made work which is notable for its variety of means and situations, and which feeds, I think, on a number of different impulses, including a literary impulse which is not immediately apparent in the work, which presents itself as being visually very intense and often very small. But there are a host of ideas that feed into a work which, again, is apparently quite minimal in certain respects. It is perhaps worth reminding ourselves that once upon a time, not so very long ago, our scourge and resident Hilton Kramer attacked Richard Tuttle's retrospective show at the Whitney Museum as being the least of less that he'd ever seen, or something on that order. I'm glad to know that Hilton Kramer is writing in the orange pages of the New York Observer, and that Richard Tuttle is not the least fazed by that criticism long ago. In fact, what you've seen since that time is a widening up, an opening up of all of the possibilities which were manifested in that first exhibition, and you're talking about a 20-year career after that which was represented in the first 10 years in that retrospective. This is a particularly good year for reacquainting yourself with Richard's work if you don't know it, or if you know it a little bit. There was an exhibition this fall at Speroni Westwater, who represents him, which included both new work and a sort of mini retrospective in the second half of the gallery. And then coming up very shortly in a month's time, a show which is now at Trinity College in Hartford will be coming to the New York Public Library. And it's devoted to Richard's work with books and books as a form. He also has made hosts of drawings, he's made objects, he's made things that, at least at the Museum of Modern Art, where we debate what is or is not a painting, we have agreed to call paintings. He's made a host of things which have not a signature style, but a signature touch. And I think that I will leave it there for the moment and ask some questions afterwards, but first of all let Richard speak himself about the work and show you examples of it. Just for the rules of the road, once upon a time we had a system here where questions were written down, handed forward, and I read them to the artist in response, because the third part of the program is a chance for you to ask things of the artist. We've let that go because it seemed a more pleasant and more personal way to have the questions addressed directly to the audience. The two things I would ask you are, or maybe three. First, that you say it loud enough that not only we on stage can hear it, but that other people in the audience can hear it. Two, that you make it brief enough so that we don't use too much of our time. And four, that you do not use it as an opportunity to make a speech. Speeches are all very welcome, and there should probably be a speaker's corner in New York City, but since there isn't, this is not the place to start. Okay, I will let Richard get on stage. I will disappear to the wings, and then after he's spoken, I'll forward some questions, then it's your turn. Richard?
Thank you, Rob. I was pondering, what one can really say about one's work anyway, and what the answer to that was that I should just try to go through these slides and say why I was excited about them, or why I like them, or what thrilled me enough to take the time and spend the energy to do such a piece. So I think we'll just go on like that, and start with the first. I see there's a button here. Okay. This, well, what I thought of to say about this was just to try to say what my emotion was, and that in this piece, I think you emotionally you get a floating because of the shape, and then this little point here gives you a fall, and then this area gives you a lift, and I think that art or picture making is quite amazing, because it gives you the possibility in one thing to have such. There's no other way I can think of to convey the feeling of floating and falling and rising all at the same time, and so for me that was enough to make a picture. And I should say that this is from 1965, and this is going to be a kind of a chronology of 30 years' work, ending with the most recent pieces, which I feel was a real high point for me. But because it is new work or fresh, I think it needs a little bit of the kind of buttressing you can get by looking at its a 30-year birthing, as it were. This is another piece from 1965. It's a floor piece. To carry on with that theme of the emotions, that I think of this piece as if you're walking through Central Park and on a spring day, and the light, the sunlight is coming through some trees with new leaves, and they cast a shadow. So you're getting a combination of the dark green and the light green, and as such, I'm sure it's a kind of a play on the whole impressionist idea of the shadow being the chromatic opposite. And a lot of my work is I enjoy puns and playing on visual experiences, and so this is the play here is that, as you see before you, that the shadow is not the chromatic opposite of the lighted part. This is from 1966, and it. I think it's a very joyful piece. It's really like being so excited that you have double arms. You're so thrilled. This is from 67. As you may notice in this, that the works are getting thinner and thinner. The tin piece, the last piece, was thinner as such because it was much smaller. This piece is probably 45 inches, or between 45 and 50 inches across there. I guess it's the the thing that excited me about this was the notion of combining a physical and a metaphysical, and you could say these three bars represent some sort of metaphysical state, and then the physicality would be this kind of joining system, and that using one material or letting one material as free as it can be seemed to be a solution of how to make a unity between the physical and the metaphysical. Colors also, I think, color-wise, it interested me that the sensuality of the color is part of the metaphysical. A lot of times a piece gets made out of the excitement of the discovery of and that the metaphysical area, which might ordinarily be thought of in black and white terms, suddenly got this color. Not only did it get a color, it got a very sensual color. Those cloth pieces that we just saw led to cloth octagonals, again from just letting the cloth be as much as it possibly could be. I've always been criticized for being passive. And I guess that's not a very good way to be a New York artist, but it interests me that by allowing a material, for example, to be what it wants to be, there's some connection with allowing yourself to be what you want to be too, and that there's a more surprising strength to be found by allowing things to happen rather than trying to make them happen. So the cloth octagonals went into paper, and what I think was going on here is where someone in my generation had to solve in our own way the problem that the first generation abstractionists solved, which some people have called the conquering of time, and if we can stretch our imaginations a little bit, that one could say that they had to pay. I mean, that was enough in a romantic tradition that they had to pay for that with their lives. So I think in my generation we had to do what they did, but then to figure out a way not to pay with our lives. So there are about 4 years, a good 4 years, when all that I did was this irregular octagonal form, with the white paper octagonals as this one is. I could do once, one a month, and there's also, the other side of it wasn't the. The other side of the experience was also the interest in trying not to make art, to try as hard as possible to resist or fight against making the art as a way of bringing out the what would be more important if it did come out than something that was not resisted. So I don't know if people can see that terribly well, but that's generally the outline. This happens to be the first of the paper octagonals. That notion of trying to not lose one's life came in, in a strange situation, because this is a wire piece from 1972, and there's a certain way of seeing this or looking at it that you can say that this effort for 7 or 8 years of getting thinner and thinner and thinner has finally exploded back. So but in that explosion back, you get to see what it was you were trying to squeeze down. And it looks from this that there are these three levels. There's the pencil level, which is the beginning of the piece, and then the wire, which is put exactly over that pencil but springs back, and then the shadow creates a third linear element, and it is a reversal where in the abstract expressionist position, that conquering, you had an out, in, out situation, and here you have an in, out, in, out. So in a very kind of primary terms, you see this is and I sometimes refer to these pieces as my life insurance, because we've not been successful in putting them on another surface that they seem very much to want to be free on a wall surface. And I get to make them as long as I'm alive. But they're incredibly sensitive to both the physical situation where they're made and my own situation. So if I'm not if my art and I are not friendly, they'll show immediately in these and cause to make more inferior pieces. This is a work from '74. There were 8 of these pieces. They have this, strangely enough, this same 3 component composition part. The first part of the composition is this piece of wood that is very easily seen. The second part of the composition is all of them have an edge that's painted white somewhere. And in this piece, that very top edge is white. This is about 3 feet from floor to ceiling. Yeah. Oh, and the third part of the composition is that it must be as flush as possible to the wall. So, and all walls are uneven. That means nail holes which are used at one time are not the correct position for the nails another time. So that over a length of time you will get a composition that is actually not formed yet, but is in the process of forming, that is made of all of these points that are, some are filled with nails and others are empty. And I very much think of the work as open-ended. As you see it, it seems very closed, but because of that third level of composition, I think it is very open-ended. It's also open-ended because the last piece in this group created a vertical that could be broken into levels, which I spent the next 10 years working. Every piece from this point on until about the late 70s had a specific height. This is, which would be true of this one, the height of these is 54 inches to there. So you have a piece of rough watercolor paper that is folded, and then the other half is painted directly onto the wall. And I was interested that I could always remember the part that's painted onto the wall, but I never could remember the part that's the piece of paper, and that the energy could only be used once on the paper part, and the kind of energy that's required for the painting part could be done ad infinitum. We have this is one where the pale orange actually goes onto the black. This so-called painting part is actually a pencil ovoid right there. Self-explanatory. This is a very. I apologize for the dirtiness of the slide, but you'll see that it's a chance to see a close-up of the next shot, which is all of these pieces are like that. They are roughly around 1980, and they're made on notebook lined notebook paper, and you have they all have these copper hangers on them, and I guess I felt that these are all a kind of exercise that we had gone out of a period where you had this ambiguity between the near distance and the far distance, and that we'd sort of rediscovered the middle distance. And just the same way as a hawk could fly hundreds of feet down to earth and pick up a little mouse, that the eye that human beings have for the middle ground, for seeing the middle ground, could be honed almost to the hawk's degree of sharpness. So hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these drawings were made. And these were a particular group called Great Men. This is from 72. Also, it's still having the height, the specific height, which hangs from there. This is about 76, and it uses hot glue that a lot of this, the connections of the wire here are made with this hot glue, which leaves spidery trails behind it. And someone made the observation that those trailings are in fact the most important part of this piece, and that they are actually, make this connection with the piece to language. This is a late 80s piece I made for a show in Berlin. I was fascinated by the evening, very oblique angled light you find there, that I connected with Kirchner and the German Expressionists, and was also that cross-hatching that it turned into, and Kirchner seemed to relate to the chiaroscuro, the use of the cross-hatching in the Renaissance. And so I just wanted to tie all those things together. This is the only slide I have of an important group of work from the late 80s called floor drawings, and there were 20 of them, and as happens often in my work, I felt that art should not be autobiographical. I didn't like having to know about people's lives in order to enjoy a work of art. And so no sooner did I think that than this that became an element, not the only element of this group. And one reason I'm happy to show this slide is that the strange feature of this group was that a part was equal to the whole. So if I showed a slide of the entire sculpture, to me it wouldn't be more or less than showing a detail of it. And I guess I take the point of view that as time goes by and the world changes and so on, there's some wonderful things that every period or every time offers, and part of my job, I guess, is to see what's great at that time, and to as if you could, maybe it's like taking a photograph of it, or to recognize it or hold on to it, or the next two, maybe this is just one slide, but this is another example of the late 80s work. And I had lunch today with a man who did my show in Valencia in Spain, and that brought to mind the situation where I had always been troubled that in my work, the octagonals of, say, 67, 8 to as long as 72 seem to have a hole that they in order for them to be made, they had to be connected in the world with something that was whole in the world. And maybe that's a kind of idea of picture making that is not shared by everybody, but it's important for me. And then as good as it was that the wire octagonals came along and shattered that hole, and one gained from that, that ever after that the work has looked a little fragmented, or less the way a whole would look strong, that these pieces tend to look weak. But in Valencia, we took one long corridor as a kind of neoclassical museum, and it lent itself to just building a long line of work. And so when you walk down that line, the most curious thing was that you could feel that all of these pieces were enjoined to an even greater whole than the whole that existed in the late 60s or the early 70s. And so we don't know if that whole will ever be realized or if, as time goes on, the connection with pieces such as this will be more evident. Their connection to that whole will become more evident. But they do seem to be part of the whole. How they are is something I don't know yet. This is a kind of work I'm proud of. It's hard to again to see, but this is actually a piece that is about 5 inches by 5 inches by 5.5 inches, and it is in this case about 1.5 or 1.25 inches from the floor, and then you get there's a pencil line that goes all the way up to the ceiling and then out onto the ceiling about 18 inches. And these, there's a lot that one could say about them, but I have this notion that since the Baroque times, a lot of art has been about like stealing from the angels and bringing it to earth. And in my heart, I sort of feel tickled that this is a case where one's saying, okay, poor angels, now we're going to give something back to you. And there's this little line that goes up that there are quite a large number of these pieces, and every case is trying to almost give a little acupuncture pressure to an angel somewhere up there. This then is from about 92. It's a piece called Whiteness. They have this funny aspect where maybe I should say that they, I believe now that they are intended for a gray wall, and that it's almost like you could say a shamanistic calling, where you set up attention, you suggest a certain possibility, and then you give a response to that possibility, and then wait for what is called up or what comes up. And in every case, it's in this group of work. Again, there happen to be exactly 20 of them. And what I liked about them very much was this idea of laughing at the whole notion of depth, or depth psychology, or the notion of the deep or the other world, or the psychological, that if you could see all these elements gathered together on the surface and they worked in terms of a painting or an artwork, then, what is this thing, where some of us get involved with that we call deep. This is probably from about 1993. I was hoping we could see it better. There's a very tiny edge up there where there are coloration, and maybe from where you're sitting in the audience, you can see there's a whitish square underneath. These are it's from a group called Renaissance Unframed, and that's made. They're kind of monoprints that were made in Florida at the graphic studio. The coloration is encaustic, and yeah, I'm going to labor on that. This is a piece from a group. It's called Source of Imagery. I'm intrigued with the notion that they are about breaking the line, which would be represented in this case by the edge of the floor and wall, and that this is the element that actually breaks it, and it's prevented from sliding back and getting reabsorbed in the wall. And my notion of this is that it's an effort to create a situation where you're not trying to describe the physical world in terms of macrocosm on one hand or microcosm on the other, or atomic physics on one side or subatomic physics on the other, and that or light as waves or molecules, or a lot of these explanations we have are, I find, they're not explanations. This is another from the group. The significant cube winds up in the middle. This is another from that group. Yeah. Okay, and this is from the show that was at Speroni Westwater in the fall. It's perhaps something less than, about 3 feet, a yard high. And again, I guess I've always been wrestling with the shape, the feeling that a real ambiguity that we act as if we understand shape 100%, but I feel we only understand it about 50%, so and part of that, of course, is about where things end as one thing and they begin as something else. Rob and I had a little kind of nice conversation a week or so ago where I said that just because my work has been so much involved with sight and place and installation and so on, that in terms of art, that could be actually a strategy to the best strategy you could use to get to its opposite, which would be lack of place, or and which I think in terms of virtual reality and a lot of things that some of the most interesting thinking at the moment is really, it's concerned with lack of place rather than place. But and again, art has this special ability to just in the same way, like emotionally, you can be three different places simultaneously. That you can feed in the emotions to the concepts and come up with, to me, some intriguing results. So I'm going to just more or less run through these. I loved very much being able to draw on this board and finding the pencil skittering and then following where that pencil went. So I find artists are looking for a new surface for their work, and that in the same way Giorgione could have been excited by painting a saint on canvas, because the weave of the canvas in relation to the paint expressed a spirituality that was what a saint, after all, was supposed to look like. That this, in my own stupid way, skittering this pencil across on this wafer board, felt, if it didn't equal Giorgione's expression, at least it felt it was I was as integrated with a surface as he must have felt at that moment. That's it.
Comfortable. I just have sort of questions coming from several different angles, but maybe to sort of deal with not biographical things so much as earlier thoughts. I was struck by the pieces when I saw them that had the trailing glue on them. First because, as a function of being a boy, I guess you make model airplanes and such, and the trailing glue was the thing that always glommed onto the perfect piece of plastic and screwed it up. And for somebody to have discovered a use for this mistake struck me as kind of inspired. But it also struck me as being very much like a painterly gesture, basically. And there are lots of painterly aspects to the way in which papers are cut and folded, for example, that happen apart from the situations where paint is directly involved at all. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about your sense of what was available to painting when you began your work, and how it is that you took certain of painting's concerns someplace else, and why.
I made a distinction. I don't know how widely it could or should be held, but the distinction was that in painting, the impulse is to change the world, or the way the world looks. If one is unhappy or needs variety, or for whatever reason you simply try to make it the way you would like it to be. But in sculpture, it's the other, that you change yourself, and that the form that's made, or it, I mean, one could, as we all, through earthworks and Christo and so on, that these sort of forms can be quite extensive, but I think they still fall into an area where I'm the side that changes, so in my case, I think I would naturally feel that I want to use everything I can to. And the notion of picture making is very near and dear in the sense that I very often feel I can't get on very well in the world without somebody giving me a picture, and a picture is exactly that. It helps me to get on. Whether if I make it or somebody else makes it, I don't really care, but the and whether I'll say if it's another artist's work and I adjust my way of seeing the world to his or her way of seeing the world, or if I'm physically change myself. So I'm afraid that's all that I can account for myself for being so impure is to say that I'll use any trick in the book to get what I want.
Sounds like a truthful answer. One of the questions which comes up a lot in discussion of your work is also, in a sense, related to people's expectations coming out of the 40s, 50s, even early 60s. I think it was Clement Greenberg's phrase, American-type painting, by which he meant big painting. And it was not, as is now often thought, I think, just a matter of grandiosity on the part of the artist. There are many reasons for large scale. But when somebody goes so completely in the opposite direction, it's a matter of note. And I wondered how you arrived at your understanding of how diminutive scales, or smaller scales in any case, could work to establish nonetheless pretty large spaces, or to pin them down in some fashion.
Yeah. Well, when I started out, I felt very much I had to get an education, and I sought out like people like Betty Parsons, who he used to say that the first generation post-war were doing was she'd wave her arms and say they're painting the expanding universe like this, and I thought, well, that's great, but that there must be an equal and opposite energy that is also important, so and I guess it's also a lot of people talk. They use the word poetic about my work or like that, and I don't consider myself a poet, but the poetry is based on compression, and so is my work. That the two so that might be an answer, and then there's just the simple terms of being poor, and I felt that if I truly live in the world's greatest society, then I should be able to function, and if I can only function by living in a $28 a month rent apartment, then that should be the kind of work I make, that fits in there, and it's just that's how it is. I didn't feel I had to, go out and, slave away to enough money to buy one of the lofts that you paint a big painting in. Gee, makes sense.
I was going to say, I don't know if you know the Vogels, but they were early and steadfast collectors of Richard's, and they lived in a smallish apartment, which is full of his work. So thank God somebody makes work for small apartments. Another aspect of it has to do with scale, actually, has to do with both the body of the artist. That was one of the rationales for abstract expressionism, was the body moving through or around a picture as if it was moving through space. And also, of course, the viewer's body, whether something spreads out around you and envelops you. Mm-hmm. And my experience, anyway, of a fair amount of your work that I've seen is that, first of all, it makes me feel terribly clumsy. It is as if one were confronted by an extremely focused and extremely fragile thing, which commanded the space, but also, again, made one feel in one's movements rather awkward, rather less sophisticated than it. And I wondered if you have a vision of how it is that people physically respond to your body. Physically respond to your work. You might have a feeling about the other one too, but that's not for now. Physically respond to your work. And the balance between looking at something, the visual side, and the sort of kinetic side of it.
Well, actually, you mentioned the Vogel, so I'll carry that on a little bit farther. But it's always been very important to me that the work communicate to one other human being on Earth, and if it does or can, then that's a significant fact. I think in American art, it's like the walls are always changing, and also, but then we are able to see those walls only upon occasion. So that's there's a dynamic in that, and there's another dynamic in the sense of, I think what has been going on for quite some time is a very long and gradual destruction of the subject-object relationship. And in my work, when I was living in New York, there was a kind of a moment when you had to start with the object piece and then the viewer, and then that got stepped into a triangle with the piece and the artist and the viewer, and then began this incredible multiplication of those points. And so it was, in some strange way, a kind of accounting for the way Julio Gonzalez was very involved in satisfying sculpture in terms of 8 points. That the relation of the the figure. The human figure is the only thing that seems to be interesting enough to be completely in the round, or as a kind of universal. We can look at a human figure upside down or from top to bottom or wherever. But in terms of abstract form, it isn't that. That's not the case. But Gonzalez pushed that to make a sculpture that was satisfying in these 8 different areas. So those were the 8. I think those were the 8 points that then got even expanded farther and farther, and I'd even say that this is a kind of a big effort to get to there's such a connection between destroying the I-it relationship and the destruction of the subject-object relationship, and there's such a connection between the I-thou relationship and social space, that emerged when in this multiplication of these points. And I love, in terms of doing work, for example, I'm, I guess, called a minimalist or a mini-minimalist or whatever, because I did this group of pieces that were shown, that were part of the show at the Whitney, and they really were. I finally used coffee stirs as the foundation for them, but in my mind, it was the chance that it's really complicated. But I'm interested in the laws of stasis. That's the most interesting thing for me. But in learning those laws, very often a piece has to be buttressed or supported by the dynamic that's of major interest, and that just like everything else, you have to keep your eyes open because these things come along in life, but I find that the mid-'70s situation, which was, many people could call it the end of the avant-garde or the end of the modern movement or so on, but I saw it as a change that the human mind changed from being concerned with a point in space to a point in time, and that an artist could chronicle that, and that's what these little points were about it. And I thought everybody would be just overjoyed to see what it looked like to see a point in space change into a point in time. Whoever gets to see that, and isn't that a worthy picture? But Hilton Kramer didn't care for it.
we won't dwell on him, but he was so pleased by himself in writing that review that he even mentioned it in this week's column, Lo, These 20 Years. It's, I don't know, must have been his own version of his finest hour. But in any case, one of the things that interests me also is, and I would like actually if you could follow it up in the question of space to time, is that, for example, in the show at the Whitney Museum in '75, you reinstalled the exhibition pieces that were in the show already. It wasn't that you were so much adding, I think, is that you were taking pieces that were already in the show and reinstalling them in different orientations. And for example, if I'm not mistaken, the wall pieces, the fabric wall pieces, came down to the floor. And so something that was in a painterly space suddenly, although it was still, in a sense, without volume, became something in a sculptural space. And I wonder if you could sort of open that up as a...
Yeah. There's a wonderful poet important to us. His name is Charles Bernstein, and he did a list of the poets and the artists who are more or less born during the second wars of the Second World War, and he said that, you know, there are certain characteristics that these people share, and one of them is the notion they were born into a world that was broken, and their one of their main obsession is putting it back together, you know, trying to, and the notion of, I mean, what is a broken world? It's like the you know, our illusions are separated from the reality, you know, and that in some kind of very basic way, that the wall falls on the illusion side of things, you know, and the floor falls on the real side of things. And for example, all through my work, even until very, very recently, you see the conjoining of the wall and the floor, which is, I guess it has this theme again of taking something that is broken and putting it back together again. So if you have a piece that one moment can go on a wall, and then you say, okay, now it can go on the floor. I mean, that's it's something. It's one thing that functions either in the world of illusion or in the world of reality. And in that sense, art has always been a question of how the artist conjoins. But I hope you can. Because that's an idea of Charles's, that the tremendous desire to bring together the broken, the sense of this broken, and so it finally becomes an urge, the urge itself to do art. And it's almost, that's why this generation is a little bit odd, because I just said that, you know, all artists through history have tried to, I mean, El Greco, you know, the illusion and the reality. I mean, Michelangelo or whatever, you know. But with this group, it's not that. It's almost like they're not. That they and I think that's part of why the whatever it is that post-minimal, why the forms look like that, because they're not, they don't begin from a whole relationship with the world. They begin from a broken relationship with the world, and so it's. it's a little bit, but the odd thing is, I find that it's the ideas, the set of ideas that come about through making that world whole again, that are the significant ideas for the next century. And I find with younger artists at the moment, it's a totally different game. But they, in order to be convincing in terms of today's art of today, they must refer to that set of ideas. It must be indicated somehow in their work that that these and it's further odd when you look at the personalities of that group. They're not. They're like, wondering. There simply isn't the consciousness of the self that one expects in an artist.
Let's just ask one more question, then open it up to the floor, which is related to this, the wholeness and the brokenness, is singularity versus complexity, basically. That it seems to me that over time the work, in many respects, in terms of the added elements of color and texture, in terms of the materials that are used and so on, has gotten increasingly complex in its compositions. That the early forms, like the paper pieces on the wall or the cloth pieces, had the qualities of not predictable symmetrical forms, but nonetheless of codified forms. You could remember them. And there's the big series of sort of alphabet shapes that are not actually letters, but are close enough in kind that they stay in the mind. And one thing that strikes me is that the pieces that are being made over more recent years are almost impossible to hold in the mind, but rather than it's being about fragmentation as an unpleasant experience, it's about a kind of letting go of that desire to hold on tight to something, and that you then re-experience the pieces again and again and again as being fresh and unpredictable in how they read. Is that a fair take on what's going on, and is that of any?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think whenever you find somebody who's trying to, who's involved with the whole situation, you're going to find somebody who will establish, the original establishment will be then contradicted, and perhaps it will be then established at a later point. One of my models is the philosopher Immanuel Kant, who did his brilliant critique on pure reason as a very young man, and it just stunned the world and so on. And it was an enormous quote success. But then he had to spend the entire rest of his life trying to do a critique of practical reason, and it was never ended, and it was never a success. But it's worth reading.
Okay, let's open it up to the floor. And again, please speak up loudly enough so we can hear you, but also so that other people in the audience can hear you. There's somebody way in the back.
I find some of what I do is akin to like a scientist, the way a scientist might design an experiment in a laboratory to set up a number of things that are only there to find an exception, to find the exception to a certain rule. And because I think that art making is it's a complete social engagement, and that in some sense the artist gets the permission from the society to do their work, inasmuch as they demonstrate that this is a complete social engagement. And so I know that's contradictory to what I said earlier about it. It really, it's only interested me if one other human being can understand a certain work. But these are, because my view that art is such a broad thing that one's always trying to push the weights as far out at either end of as one can. So the notion that how do you find nowhere, and I would say that for example our society is at this point still is very based on the notion that you are different than I am, that there's a difference between us, and so that seems to me, I'm more interested in a situation where there's no difference between you and I am. So if the notion of something is connected with the notion that we are different, it seems to me we're kind of locked. We're locked into something. Whereas if and I guess that's my struggle at the moment, because as a complete social engagement, I'm trying to convince all of us, including myself, that of the benefit of this other point of view where human beings are not different so much different as we think from one another. And just as I said that in the state where human beings are different from one another, you can start that spin of points of view and carry on so completely that a social space emerges that that's not an endpoint. What I'm suggesting is from that point to say to you that something is graspable in one or the other of us that can, under normal knowledge conditions, can pass to the opposite side, and neither you nor I will know of that. And because we don't know that, we have we've gotten beyond the laws of knowledge as we know them, and you know, it's just a notion about kind of an exciting adventure. Or, I mean, to go into a place in the where, I mean, perhaps you can tell from my halting delivery that I'm trying to get into this place where, frankly, I don't know. I have no experience. I have no means to take these steps in there. But yeah, and what Rob was saying, that I mean, about this complexity or this growing complexity, that from talking to some young artists now, they, I mean, like whether they're really dealing with landscape or whether they're really dealing with spiritual situation or whether they're really dealing with art, I mean, all that becomes unimportant. And I mean, I've always been, I had another disastrous exhibition in a museum in Holland, and it was because I said to the director that, well, I found, everything now is turning into art instantly. It's just barely recognition happens, and it's art, and that I said I wanted to make an exhibition of something that hadn't turned into art yet. And I mean, he was, kind of intrigued and let me go ahead. But the, a curator who wasn't even the curator of the show got punched out in a bar, for having anything to do with that museum. And it was that, but it's the same. It's the same thing about we just have to get to a place where it's we don't have to worry about it becoming art. Is that what I mean? Because it's I mean, it's the same thing as, if you're in the woods and you look down and you see this beautiful leaf and you're just like totally you have all of life. I mean, that is all there is in life, and then you say, oh, it's an oak leaf, and you lose it all,
Yes, please. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Um, I thought, did you ever read Emerson, the American philosopher? Well, I think I always felt like I want to make as exciting things visually as he does says verbally, you know. And that if you read Emerson, it's just amazing. Where and you have the same idea. Where did that come from? It's but it's. But I find, I mean, sometimes I say anyone who has as many T's per letters as I have in my last name has to be a transcendentalist. Well, the thing is, I mean, I have a lot of respect for the thousands of year tradition that have brought us to having certain places for art, and that's not my problem. My problem is what gets put in those places. The ideal would be that you could have those places and have something. I mean that's again strange, but I'm still trying to work with this point that art has this unique ability to span great opposites, great differences, and it's that I love most of all about it, and that if one had a historically devolved space for art, how great it would be to have something that hadn't yet become art in it. And that's always this ambition,
Yes, please.
Right, right. Yeah, it's that you do something. It's not. I mean, that's in art. Once you achieve something, it's forever. And that a piece of 72 or I don't need to go on. I mean, once, I guess it's you just look for new challenges, and 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 a lot of times the challenges come as the opposite of what you achieved. So I achieved something which I felt was very passive in essence, but. So then the new challenge might be not that I don't think I'm that temperament, but that I might just try to see what I could get at being as aggressive as possible. The fact that I made something that has no back or no top or no front was an achievement, but then that's what I was trying to say about that. I find in American art that there are many walls, and that the wall on which, say, a wire piece from 72 is different than a slat piece of 74, just because time changes. And I have no, I mean, it's between me and myself if I feel I'm working as hard as I can at a certain point. I find too that I guess from the beginning, maybe it has to do with this particular notion of our generation that we don't have a self-awareness that you'd expect from a normal artist, and that's why having an artistic personality never seemed a big problem for us. But pushing that farther, the object is not to establish an artistic personality, it's to escape from an artistic personality that you didn't have in the first place. Now, you figure that one out.
Okay, let's have one more question, and then I think it'll be time to let the why have its room back. Hold on one second. Yes, please.
I get a sense of transience, like the bubble is floating, and then you take the pin and you pop the bubble at some point. And so if you take a 1972 wire piece and put it on a 1996 wall, does the piece evolve? Is it any longer a piece? And does it matter because you said there's a nowhere? And so if the old once was, and it's in somebody's head,
Right.
and it no longer is the same as it was, does it matter? Is it okay to just be a blip on the screen?
Yeah. Very. No. That's good. Yeah. I think it matters to engage to the jugular, and that I'm not coming here. I mean, it's equal to me whether I come and I parade my successes or I parade my failures. You know, it's rather the same. But I would like you to think that I'm engaging completely. And one thing I thought you were saying, I don't know if you were saying this, but there's something where, like, I'm absolutely not into imagination or the imaginative world. I like nothing more than to, like, come back to the concrete after an imaginary experience, for example. I get more pleasure coming back. However, there's a certain way of seeing that I think it's generally shared, where you can see in one artist's work another of that same artist's work. Like, you can superimpose that even over years. And that's, I think, it's a test of quality. It's a test of the right to exist for something to. It's a test for the individual's occupation, of that, but it doesn't prove that it's real. That that when we talk about the blip, it worries me. We're getting into the world of unreal things, and the imagination. What I don't know is how do we come back to what we've established as real and say, can you save us from the imagination of the blip, and I think that's one. I think that's in the world. That kind of salvation is in the world. And that. We're just the fact that you came to that point that you just did is encouraging, gives me encouragement, and so that's why I think that there is reality, but not in art. See, okay, boy, that's a rough one, because the art has to be about the real, but I would say that the that it's like as soon as it's called art, it becomes unreal somehow, and that that's why. I mean, if I'm completely out of my mind with excitement making a piece or a drawing or something, and I feel the excitement comes from being close to reality. You know, whenever you really get close to reality, I mean, that's the thrill. That's the great thrill, and that the piece gets made, and hopefully it carries. I mean, that excitement lives for a while, but it's. I mean. What did I miss? I missed a little point that you were making. No, I don't.
I think we should probably wind up, but I just would say, apropos of wire drawings or wire-related things, which I think was part of the premise, that the Modern owns one, and the first installation that I did when I came to the Modern, I put up some of the big, definitely art pieces from our collection, John's flag, Frank Stella's black paintings, and so on. And I put up the wire piece that we have, which has wonderfully simple and efficient instructions, and it made itself completely known in the company of those things which were less uncomfortable with the label art. And I think it's the back and forth that each one on their own terms can hold their ground that makes it possible actually for museums to show this kind of work without its becoming stale, basically. There's something that goes on among works of art, and fortunately Richard's things are dispersed widely enough that if you correlate them, I think you'll understand exactly how concrete the abstractions we've been talking about tonight are. Okay, so thank you very much.
Thanks for listening. For more information on the 92nd Street Y, New York, and all of our programs, please visit us at 92ny.org.